Welcome to this demonstration presentation for one-to-one sessions for experiments with unconstrained goals. To start with, this is a blank one-to-one experiment sheet for Patrick Dixon. Patrick works in the alterations team and he attends the learning team, so that's a group learning session of test team. So what I want to talk through is Patrick's experience as he sets up, runs and completes some experiments. So to start with, Patrick's coach will print off this sheet. So this is Patrick's generic one-to-one coaching sheet. This does not change from session to session. So the coach just goes in and prints Patrick's standard sheet. Patrick and the coach will go into a room. The only thing they need to bring to the room to start the effort is this blank sheet. And what they will do is they will start to fill it out. So the first thing to see is that a GROW experiment has got a goal, a reality, an opportunity, and a will. So the goal is what Patrick and his coach have agreed that Patrick would like to change or what he would like to achieve in terms of his work environment. The reality is what is happening today. So generally Patrick or his coach will see something deficient in the way that Patrick's operating or an opportunity for Patrick to improve. So what they must do there is write down the reality of what's really going on. The third thing then is the opportunity. So then they should list all the things that maybe Patrick could do in order to achieve his goal. He's not necessarily going to do all of these right away, but this is more of a speculative type box to think about the things that could be done. And then finally, they go down to the will box. And what they will do there is they'll fill in exactly what Patrick will do in order to achieve his goal. And what you can see is in the gridded box beside it, the shade day where will 1 is done, Patrick will shade that in day by day as he goes through the next 4 weeks trying to achieve his goal. So what you can see here is with unconstrained goals, you can have 2 goals. Patrick, this is a valid experiment as it's set up now. This could be taken off, scanned, and this would then become an active experiment in the system. However, Patrick and his coach have decided that they want to set up a second goal. So in this case, what you can see is they filled in an additional goal, an additional reality, and an additional will. If when you're setting up your experiment, you decide you do want to have a second goal, you must fill in all of the additional boxes. So your experiment will be rejected if you fill in, for example, a reality for goal 2 and a will for goal 2, but you do not fill in a goal 2 box. So you either must fill in all the additional boxes for a goal 2 or none of them. So having done this, the coach can now take this away, scan this sheet, that will then be processed into the system, and they will then pass the sheet back to Patrick for him to fill in what he needs to fill in day by day. So what does that look like? So here it is on Patrick's desk. And what you can see is as he completes his day's work, he will go across to the area where it's necessary to shade in what he has done in the day and shade in whether or not he has executed that will for that particular day. Now, one of the things that you can see is that these are not dated sheets. So the system will work out from the shaded start date what date the day and the week corresponds to when Patrick shades it in. So we have shaded in a start date for a Sunday. So what we can see is week 1 will then commence on a Monday, and it's valid for Patrick to shade in from that Monday of week 1 whether or not he has done that experiment. So what you can see in week 1 is Patrick has shaded the Monday, the Wednesday, and the Thursday to indicate that he has attempted the will 1 on those days and has left the Tuesday and Friday blank because he has not tried anything on those days. For the will 2, he has shaded the Monday, but then he hasn't shaded on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and then he has shaded again on Friday to say that he has attempted his experiment on that day. So what we can see is that Patrick has run with these 2 experiments for 4 weeks. And at the end of that period, he is then going back into the one-to-one session with his coach. So to going in to the session with his coach, we asked Patrick to do a little bit of preparation. So the first thing that we ask him to do is to indicate the number of days where he actually thinks he has attempted his experiment. So the simplest way of doing this is simply to add up the number of days that he has attempted the experiment. So what you can see is for Will 1, he has attempted his experiment on 8 days, and for Will 2, he has attempted it on 5 days. However, Patrick does have the option of putting in a higher number. So for example, if Patrick thinks, oh, well, I have tried this experiment on some days when I have forgotten to shade in at the end of the day that I've done it, he may say, well, I think I've actually tried maybe 11 days for experiment 1 and 8 for experiment 2. In that case, we ask him to shade in the attempts, the number that he believes he has done, but not to go back and shade in the days that he thinks he's missed, just to shade in the number of attempts that he thinks he's made. The other thing that we ask Patrick to do is to shade in the completion date. So this is the date that he's going into the session to review the experiment with his coach. So having filled that in, Patrick will then go in and sit down with his coach. They will then discuss the experiment. We ask Patrick to fill out his comment on the experiment, what worked and what didn't work. And equally, we ask the coach to do the same thing. We also ask Patrick and the coach to indicate the effort that they think Patrick has made on the 2 experiments. In this case, 5 is high effort, 0 is low effort. And as you can see, we are looking for Patrick and the coach to fill in the effort value for both experiments, giving altogether four scores there. Will 1 effort for Patrick and coach, Will 2 effort for Patrick and coach. We also ask Patrick and the coach to sign to indicate that they have actually had the conversation. It is required for all of these fields to be filled in order for the experiment to go to a valid closure. If any of the experiments are missing, Patrick and his coach will receive an error email indicating that the experiment has not been closed properly and that they should fill it out and rescan. Okay, so once Patrick and his coach have in the session completed filling out the detail for the conclusion of experiment 1, they will then fill out another blank sheet in order to commence experiment 2. So what we can see in this case is Patrick's filling out, goal 1, the next thing I want to achieve. Goal 2, what's happening now. Goal 1, the next thing I want to achieve. Reality 1, what's happening now. Opportunity, what do I see? The next thing that I can do is, and Will 1, what exactly will I achieve? He has also filled in the new experiment starting date, which is, in this case, the 10th of August, 1 month after. This date, is likely to correspond to the closure date for the other experiment, but the system will not check that those are the same dates. So having filled this out, the coach will then take both sheets, both this sheet for the new experiment and the completed sheet for the old experiment. The coach will scan them both and send them both to scans@grow.earth or your company name at grow.earth if it is set up in that way. The system will close the first experiment and mark it as such and open the new experiment. The coach will then dispose of the paper from the first experiment. It's not needed anymore, and will pass this sheet of paper back to Patrick to place on his desk in his holder in order for him to record day by day how he is doing against this experiment. So what we will now look at is some examples of errors where these are actual experiments that have been started where an error condition has pertained and the experiment has not been moved to the correct or to the desired state. So this is a setup request. As you can see, goal 1, reality 1, opportunity and will are filled out correctly. However, the starting date has not been filled in. So the system has looked at this, it has recognized the missing starting date, and it has not started this experiment. It has sent an error message back to the coach and to the individual concerned. This is another example. So in this case, the experiment has been started. However, This is an attempt to close the experiment. The system has recognized it as an attempt to close because it has found the coach's signature, and as a consequence of that, it has decided that all the other red filled areas are not complete, therefore the experiment cannot be closed correctly, and it is put into an error state. Another example. So this is another attempt at closure. In this case, goal one, the startup fields for a single goal have been filled in correctly. However, what we see is the will one effort from the coach has not been filled in. Consequently, this experiment has not been closed correctly, and an error message has been generated. It is worth noting that an experiment which does not have the shade day when the will one is done, so in this case the user has not indicated any days when will one is done, that is not an error state. If the attempts are filled in, that is sufficient to close the experiment. It is not best practice. We do recommend that learners try to shade in every day they attempt their experiment, but the system will not insist on it.